So today we have a variety of people tuning in for the conversation, a targeted audience, in fact, which includes career office staff, interested students and faculty, other campus staff members who would have an interest around DEI and working with and advising students. We may even have some community partners and organizations joining today. I will say we are joined today by three incredible panelists who I strongly believe will be able to provide us all with insight and knowledge on best practices in creating a DEI culture. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first panelist, Patrice Blakemore. Patrice is the Senior Vice President of Equity and Inclusion of the Greater Cleveland Partnership, the GCP. She leads three principal equity and inclusion strategies, including scaling minority business enterprises, supporting efforts that promote minority development, advancement, and retention in middle to high wage positions, and advocating and advancing digital equity. Before joining GCP, Patrice served as the Executive Director for the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses at Tri-C. Patrice received her undergraduate degree from Spelman College in 3.5 years and her law degree in 2.5 years from the University of Dayton School of Law, which is super impressive, Patrice. Welcome, Patrice. Thanks for coming and joining us today.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce our second panelist, Eliseo Cruz. Eliseo Cruz is the Community Development Officer at First Federal Lakewood. He joined the bank in 2021. Eliseo has experience in working with various communities around Cleveland and building relationships with community leaders. Additionally, he is responsible for partnering with local business owners to help them achieve financial wellness. Eliseo received his bachelor's degree in applied management from Ohio University, and he is super exciting. He is expected to receive his master's of business administration in summer of 2024. So coming up super soon, Eliseo. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So finally, I'm pleased to introduce our third panelist, Renita Jefferson. Renita is a sought-after international keynote speaker, executive coach, panelist, and expert practitioner in the areas of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, employee engagement, culture, and organizational development. So very timely here. Renita currently leads diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging strategic initiatives for Avient Corporation, focused on attracting, developing, and retaining diverse talent. She partners with the senior leadership team and internal DEIB resources to enable a thriving culture built on a foundation of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Renita currently resides in Avon, Ohio, with her husband, enjoys traveling, hosting family gatherings, and community service. So thank you all to our panelists for joining us today. They'll go over a variety of topics regarding building a DEI-centric culture, including challenges and opportunities, metrics, inclusive leadership, employee well-being, and the future of DEI. I should say that the Q&A will be on, and participants, as you're watching, you can ask questions throughout. We will be selecting a few questions to include toward the end of the conversation as time allows. But first, as we dig in, let's set the stage here. Panelists, what are the key components of a diverse, equitable, and inclusive DEI culture in the workplace, and why is it important for organizations today? And Renita, if you wanted to go ahead and jump in there, we can start with you. So Renita, it looks like you're on mute.
There you go. I'm so sorry.
You're
there you
fine.
go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil, for this opportunity. I'm excited to be part of this panel and continue to talk about this particular topic. So when we think about the key components and really, I feel what is necessary for organizations, I'll speak specifically about Avient and our DEI culture. I would say that it's really led by an initiative that started approximately 10 years ago. And that was our engagement with Great Places to Work. We have conducted that annual survey for the last 10 years. The last 5 years, I believe we have conducted that survey globally. And we have achieved the distinct honor of being a great place to work. Why does that matter? As a result of that particular engagement survey, you would imagine, like most, there are some very specific action plans that we have taken very seriously as it relates to the work that we need to do after we receive the information. So this culture of trust really, I think, is foundational for the diversity, equity, inclusion work. And we've been able to create that foundation utilizing the Great Place to Work as a methodology for our associates to provide their feedback on how they are experiencing the Avient culture. The other, several other components, I'll go through these pretty quickly, certainly is leadership support. Whether it is the Great Place to Work survey, our engagement in our local community here in Lorain, or other activities that we can be a part of. In my 5 years here at Avient, and approaching our leaders with ideas and ways by which we can embed the DEI strategy, I've received nothing but positive feedback. And the same for our board. I had the opportunity to present to our board last March on the initiatives that we have created for our 3 to 5 year plan, and it was very much appreciated. I can't say enough about the metrics. Working with our HRIS team, we now have a diversity and inclusion scorecard, which allows us to look at the data globally and get a sense of current state, future state, where in fact there's some ways by which we can enhance our presence. On and on I can go there. The last thing I'll mention is strategic partnerships. So what has been most helpful to me, not only the engagement of our leadership, but the strategic partnerships that I have with our leader in talent acquisition, as well as workforce planning. It's pretty much a three-legged stool. This is not work that's done in a vacuum. You really need to have the engagement and support of those individuals.
I would like to add, in addition to what Renita is saying, is despite the political climate, we know that we're growing, and we're growing because of immigrants. We're growing because of people of color. And so our workplaces need to be able to reflect the people that are in our community. We know that for Cleveland in particular, we are only growing because we have immigrants that are coming here. Otherwise, we would not have the numbers that we need for our workforce. So making sure that a organization is diverse and inclusive is really going to be paramount to that organization's success in the long run. And the sooner that they solve for this, solve for making sure they have a diverse workforce, the more successful they're going to be as we look 10 years down the road.
Yeah. Oh, great point, Patrice. So something that I would like to add of what you just say, companies need to be diverse in all levels, not just the entry level jobs, but especially in the leadership levels, because then that way you can are able to see a different point of view, see what are the needs of the community or your clients is, and being open-minded is, and it has to be also not just diverse in races, but I believe also in ages, because different ages have different needs. So part of being diverse, I would say that it has to be with all levels, like all levels in the company, and also with age.
Thanks so much, panelists, for that. It definitely sounds like, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a very complex concept because, of course, we're dealing with complexity of humans, and so it definitely sounds like having a data-driven, strategic approach that handles all senses of diversity, equity, and inclusion, all areas, is super helpful to kind of help simplify that process. So thank you for that. With that said, to all the panelists here, another question: what are some common challenges organizations face when trying to implement DEI initiatives, and how can they overcome them? Eliseo, you can start here.
Yeah, so some of the most difficult obstacles is just operating in silos, just kind of talking about it, but not taking action. So everyone says, oh, we're diverse, but how are you really diverse? So formalizing a process, a plan around diversity, equity, and inclusion, that's what you need to do. For instance, my company is small, but we have addressed problems. So as designing a person as a leader, and now we have formalized the process. For instance, kind of what Renita was saying, we have sent like those annual surveys just for people that are confidential surveys. People can really express how they feel, and then we can address those issues. But to summarize, it's just like kind of talking about it, but not doing something. So the first the obstacle is just kind of like operating silos and not taking actions.
I would. Oh, go ahead, Patrice.
I was going to say, I would agree. We have an equity and inclusion assessment that is free, and companies can take it, and what they receive is a scorecard. And we've received feedback. And sometimes companies, their heart is in the right place, but they really don't know where to start. And then as they look at it, it seems like it's a simple solution, but it's not. It's, dealing with, do you have the structural foundation, such as a customer relationship management tool that you can document what, what are the demographics of your workforce, what are the demographics of your vendors, your suppliers. It looks like it's easy, it sounds like it's easy, but when you get down to the base of it, there are some structural pieces that need to be in place to be successful and to be able to show results.
Mm-hmm. I would absolutely agree with that, Patrice. And, to your question, Phil, what came to mind for me, I started into this work almost 20 years ago. When I started, it was just diversity. We didn't have inclusion and all of the other acronyms that we see today. And when I started, this work was treated like a training course. And I think that there, in terms of a challenge and an obstacle, right, that folks believe you can bring in someone to train your audience on what is diversity and what is inclusion, whatever else you want to have happen in that space. And that is very check mark type of work. So I think that has been an obstacle for a number of years. I feel that we're better in this community, but yet and still it is something to keep in mind to those that are in our audience. This is not a training initiative. Training is certainly part of it, but it's so much more. It's important that this work is embedded in the strategic plan. It is not this, that, the other, and diversity and inclusion and equity. Diversity, equity, and inclusion should show up in every facet of your strategic plan, because your strategic plan should include people. And if your plan includes people, then we should be talking about what it is that we are going to do to support them. This, in fact, is what I like to say, journey work. There isn't a final destination. When you get to a certain place, as you've agreed upon your baselines for your data and whatever it is, whatever else you're measuring and what tool you're using, it is how do we improve? And the last thing I'll say, again, early in my career in the D&I space, an effort that really made a difference for me and my leadership team at the time was spending some time understanding the why. Why is this important to us as an organization to pay attention to? And why would it be important to our associates? And really helping folks come along for that journey versus dictating this is what we're going to do, or reacting to an external stimuli that's occurring in our society. And that's where you will get sustainability of your effort, and it's not a fly by the flavor of the month type of experience. And I think that is an obstacle that we continue to fight against.
Yeah, absolutely. And it definitely sounds as though as time has gone on, our understanding and recognition of the issues and importance of DEI has evolved. And with that, our strategies and our intention have to evolve with it. And the way that we overcome challenges and barriers is by being intentional and strategic and understanding that it has to happen across the board. Those are all very insightful points. Eliseo, in your experience, what has been the most significant obstacle your organization has encountered while fostering the DEI culture, and how did you address it in practice?
Yeah, definitely. So what we have done, we actually have hired a communications manager, and we promote communications all over the organization by talking about the holidays, how it's important, who is impacted by that. By the holidays, and like what's really behind it. It's not that you just get data, but actually educate people, like this is what happened, this is why it's important, and this is how the communities can move forward.
So panelists, how can organizations measure the effectiveness of their DEI efforts, and what role does accountability play in this process in terms of utilizing metrics and accountability? Patrice, how does your organization measure the effectiveness?
Well, Renita spoke about this earlier. It really starts with leadership. When you talk about measurements, this is something that the leaders need to be held accountable. It needs to be a part of the strategy, and it needs to be something that's measured on a consistent basis. I mean, for our organization, our bonuses are tied to the work, to the numbers that we hit, the metrics that we hit or don't hit. And it's really interesting because not only is it the work that we're doing, is also what are the results for the region. With us being a chamber, we don't just we don't do the work. We support the work that gets done. So we support our members, we support our constituents, and we really want to be mindful and intentional about what is going to move the needle. When I came into my position about a year ago, I went on a listening tour, and one of my committee members said to me, Patrice, do not confuse activity for progress. And so that is a consistent question that we're asking ourselves. Is this activity or is it progress? And we've even had to look internally, my team, where we says, okay, we have this great dashboard, we have these activities that we're tracking, but is it moving the needle? And it wasn't, so we put it on pause because we want to make sure that the work that gets done is the result that has that we're getting outcomes that we want to see for our region and for our organization.
That is phenomenal, Patrice. I wrote that nugget down. Do not confuse activity for progress. I'm giving you a high five right there. And the other takeaway is the accountability. What you have done there and what your organization is doing there at the chamber, tying progress to your financial bonuses is best in class. Companies, who do this work well and are committed, in my point of view, understand why that's important, because without that, I do believe that there is, the accountability that you spoke of earlier, Phil, it doesn't rise to that true progress because there are no consequences or minimal consequences, frankly, if certain metrics are not achieved. So as close as we can get to, if not actually, moving forward in the policy that Patrice mentioned, is really, in my opinion, the way to go. But that is a lot of internal stakeholder conversations, and a lot, needs to happen for that type of progress to take place in an organization. And I'll finish with this: the question that you asked about the challenge. What I wrote down was fear. I do believe that this is a change initiative, and because it's a change initiative, for the most part, there's this fear. Early in my work, again, introducing this, it felt too much like affirmative action. So folks were very nervous about, well, what does it mean, Renita? If you bring these folks in, is my job going to be impacted? So I think we're still fighting that battle. It's the fear of the unknown, and really trying to address those issues as part of this work as well.
Eliseo, anything to add about how your organization may measure the effectiveness of their DEI efforts?
Yeah, definitely. Just I want to emphasize what their points made. So being able to being inclusive, include other people in this case will be in the branches or different departments, not just on the entry levels as well. So being able to accommodate for everyone, and as we mentioned earlier, Cleveland is growing. So by being diverse, you're only expanding your network. So it's only beneficial for your business as well. So as soon as management for different companies can realize that, then they're able to grow as well as a company.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm hearing here is that it really accountability does matter when you want to implement some of these measures, and I also have to applaud the GCP here in terms of tying bonuses and incentives to whether we're hitting these metrics. That's truly putting your money where your mouth is, right? The no better intention than that, certainly. So
and listen, I do want to pause and say, we're not perfect. Like, none of us are perfect. So we're still solving for X in many different areas. There's some things that we're like, hey, here are best practices. And there's other areas we're like, how are we going to move the needle? And I think having these conversations is really important, because then we can share best practices and we can share challenges. No one has it all figured out. We're all working toward a common goal, and that's to become more diverse, more equitable, and more inclusive.
And so speaking of, working towards that common goal, we often find, in many of our organizations, not just at work, but in many of the organizations that we're into, we know that, leadership, culture starts, with leadership. It starts with your standard bearers, right? And so we know the importance that leadership may play in terms of promoting DEI initiatives. But for the panelists here, what does inclusive leadership look like, and how can leaders at all levels of an organization promote DEI? And Renita, we'll start with you with this one.
So two things came to mind, Phil, for response to that, and I'm kicking myself because I have not internalized these percentages. But suffice it to say, our CEO had a goal to ensure that our board, as well as his direct reports, his leadership team, was diverse. And I know that we've hit the metrics for our board. I want to say that it's over 50% diverse by gender, as well as ethnicity. And the same thing for his direct reports, his leadership team. So he has done a great job of being an example of what he expects from those that report up through his direct reports. And we continue to share that information. He continues to talk about that at our annual leadership meetings, but he is leading by example. And I think that that goes a very long way, to promote why this is important: diversity of thought, ages, as you mentioned before, as well as gender and ethnicity. Inclusive leadership, we actually are, and this year, I created an inclusive leadership program, frankly, and now it's embedded in most of our leadership programs, as well as the work that we do for our recruiting efforts and helping the managers, people leaders in our organization go through those experiences so that they understand what is inclusive leadership, how they show up in this space, what could be some barriers and obstacles, and how do you push through those. And that's in partnership with the leader of my talent acquisition efforts here in the organization. So we embed it, we model it from the leadership, the top of the house, if you will, our CEO, and then we ensure that there is support in our leadership development programming.
Well, great point. So here at First Federal, what we have done is we have promoted managers who started, they had the entry levels. They were coached and they were developed into these leaders as well. Me being an example of that. We have different managers in all different branches that they include that diversity. However, what my company has done as well, they have an employee resource group for women. So in this employee resource group for women, everyone's welcome. They all can, anyone that can in the company can come in for women. And they talk about different resources. So what can they do to help them develop, to coach them? Or what is there an issue that they can address when it comes to working in an industry that was, well, now it's almost 50-50, but it was previously dominated by men. So we have, like they say, it's all progress. Now, we're not perfect, but we're doing one step at a time as well.
I'd love to chime in. With our equity and inclusion assessment, we have organizations that take this, that looks at their demographics, as well as best practices. And the way that we present the data is like a funnel, if you will. And we look at the workforce and say, here is how diverse your workforce is. And now we measure that workforce with the next funnel, which is, what does your senior leadership look like? And so when you talk about being inclusive, it means that your workforce is modeled in your leadership, and your leadership is modeled with your workforce. And we've had companies take the assessment, and then we have a workshop that we give, and they've looked, and it's really interesting because they're looking at the best practice section, and they're like, wow, if we scored this well in best practices, why is it not reflecting in our numbers? And so that's where those are the questions that are going to move the needle and really get results out of organizations when you have that critical thinking around what can we do better now? I mean, we've done well here, but now how does that translate into the numbers and really where we can start to see the difference?
Renita, can you think of a specific example of how your organization has empowered its leadership to become champions of DEI? I know this is by nature of your role, you would have direct access really to seeing this. And so can you talk about how your organization has done this and what impact it's had on the culture from the top down?
Sure. I mean, what comes to mind, I have a couple of examples, but what immediately comes to mind, because it was just mentioned around the resource networks, the employee resource networks. all of our resource networks have an executive sponsor, and an executive sponsor is one of our CEO's direct reports. So we have that avenue for advocacy, and I think that that goes a long way because those individuals are tied into their ERGs and understand what their ERGs are set up to accomplish as it relates to the community that they represent. So I think that that is a very important element in ensuring that diversity, advocacy, change stays on the agenda of our leadership team. The other effort that we have going on that has really expanded, again, as a global organization with, clearly individuals from all around the world, is taking into account the cultures. And what is it that we want to focus on in the various cultures? We initiated a program last year, DEI Champions, and the DEI Champions allows anyone and everyone to raise their hand to say that I will be an advocate for diversity and inclusion in the organization. And I have a structure set up that they, go through some training, and they take a pledge, and there's a whole process that builds as a result of individuals saying this is work that I want to support, and that is open to all of our associates. And we started to see a rise in the organization of membership to become a champion. And we will then take, and I have utilized that population to help move efforts along around the world. So those have been a couple of ways, in addition to, as I said before, partnering with our board, as well as resources here. Workforce planning comes to mind. Patrice mentioned this a little bit, this idea of succession planning and building your pipeline. And that starts with our college recruiting all the way through taking a look across the world at our middle level managers and what are the percentages of male, female, gender representation? Where is the gap? And what are we doing to ensure that those folks that are falling below have mentors and or coaches and are having experiences to move them to that next level of the organization? So I believe the platform very much is in place, and it takes a number of iterations, right, before it becomes ingrained into the organization. But I think we've set the table for those practices in an effective way.
And what I'm hearing really when it comes to inclusive leadership is 2 points here as a through line between all of your answers, which is that inclusive leadership really takes intentional initiatives that are far reaching throughout the organization, but start at the top. And so intentionality behind those initiatives that you have, they can't just say that we believe in diversity and equity and inclusion. We actually have to put on paper what we're doing about it and making sure that there's touch points all across the organization. The other thing that I'm really hearing is that inclusive leadership is representative, right? You can't say that I can imagine a lot of organizations will say we're looking for diverse and we're looking for equity and inclusion, but then when you look at the top, it's not very diverse. And so an important aspect of inclusive leadership is diversity even at the top. So representation. Related to that, intersectionality and employee well-being. So for the panelists here, how does the concept of intersectionality intersect with DEI efforts, and what role does it play in promoting employee well-being? And Eliseo, I know you had kind of alluded to this in some of your previous answers, but we'll start with you. Can you elaborate on how the concept of intersectionality plays a role in promoting employee well-being with your organization?
Yeah, well, it's kind of from what I went before, it's just empowerment. So it really starts from the top, like you just mentioned, like your leaders coaching, empowering you to grow as a person. So if someone who might be a minority, it gets empowered, they're able to open the doors as well, and then they're able to see a different perspective. So like I mentioned, first federal, what they have done as well is just like doing organizational happenings, expand cultural holidays, and like I also mentioned the ERG for women. So that really expands like the network out there.
I want to share a best practice. We had the opportunity to have a CEO forum in June of some of our major employers around the region, and came together, talked about how to continue to diversify our middle and high wage positions. And there were some best practices that came out of that. And one of them is having ERGs where people will join an ERG that they relate to, and then they would be a champion, very similar to what Renita was speaking of, be a champion for a different ERG. because that's where understanding and acceptance comes from. Inclusivity, all of that is not just understanding your position, but understanding others where you can advocate for them and really create the type of culture where people want to stay. I know that we may have some students on today, and as you're looking at your journey in terms of once you graduate, where are you going to land in terms of employment, you want to know that you're in an environment that's going to be supportive and that's going to help you to develop. And so as you're interviewing for these jobs, they're interviewing you, but you should be interviewing them as well. And you should be asking them what type of programs they have for their employees around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if it doesn't feel right, it's not right.
I'm writing that down too, Patrice. You're 2 for 2.
Renita, do you have any examples of how your organization, Avient, handles the concept of intersectionality and how you kind of see that impacting employee well-being and within that entire culture?
Sure. Phil, what comes to mind for me, and I agree with everything that's being said. This past year, it was in June, we decided globally that we would have ERG Collaboration Week. Why was that important? It was important because each ERG, appropriately so, was serving their community in events and acknowledgements, cultural holidays and things that they did in the community, which was great. They were on task to do all that we have asked and expected of them. But we had never done anything together under one umbrella as a representation of the organization. So we actually hosted the first ERG week. And our ERG week, our theme was reflect, realign, and renew. And what that meant was the leaders of all of our ERGs came together and they planned that week together. So we got to hear the interests, the needs, the challenges, the obstacles that the other ERGs were having, because we were all in the room together. And that became such a positive force, because from the, this idea of empowerment and intersectionality, sometimes when you operate in silos, even within diversity and inclusion, you miss those windows. So we had all of the ERGs come together. I have 2 global ERGs, and we conducted that week. And the whole week was about wellness. We all landed on the topic of wellness. So each day for an entire week, we had a session on stress. We had a session on mindfulness. We had someone here from the Lorraine community come to talk with us about suicide prevention, signs for suicide. We did health and nutrition on our last day, and it was really great to kind of stand back as leading this work and watch our ERGs come together on a common theme and have the entire organization benefit from that. And so for me, as I think about empowerment and intersectionality, that particular event, I think definitely put us on a great track for future initiatives like that.
Yeah, and it definitely just sounds like overall one of the key factors in creating a DEI culture is lifting each other up and empowering each other in a way that's collaborative. And it does affect how people feel about their jobs and feel about coming to work, right? We want everyone to be happy to come to work and feel like they belong. But that's a collaborative process. Again, it starts at the top, but everyone can play a part in that. So very, very insightful. Just kind of wrapping up, our last question here before we start to get to audience questions, talking about the future of DEI and what that looks like. Panelists, what do you envision as the future of DEI in the workplace, and how can organizations stay proactive in this evolving landscape? And Patrice, starting with you, do you feel like there are any emerging trends or innovative approaches in DEI that the GCP is exploring, and where is it going?
One innovative approach that a company is using is where they have I'll call it a leadership council. It is an 18-month program where their diverse employees can apply to it, and then they solve a business problem. So, when Renita talks about the ERGs getting together and solving a problem and addressing it and having program around it is very, very similar, where for the next 18 months, they are taking a challenge, they're coming up with a solution, and then they're presenting it to leadership. What that does is a couple things. One, it's very brilliant and shrewd because they're able to use the talent that they have and get a diverse perspective so that they have a higher probability of success. The other piece is it raises their profile. It raises the employees' profiles, where now when there are openings, leaders are like, hey, you know, Renita was pretty sharp out there. You know, I think we should consider her for this next opportunity. And so I think that that's a really great example of how you can be innovative and continue with that professional development while still serving the business needs of the company.
Yeah, I would like to chime in as well. So I'd like to kind of restate what I stated earlier. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, Phil, I like where we're heading because we're making some progress, but the work is not done. So this is only the start, the beginning of it. And I mean, you mentioned that I went to school. So actually, I read a funny story. So I would like to share with everyone. So Campbell, the soup cans. So they had a decline in their sales. Well, it turns out that a lot of the new generations are not eating their typical flavors, so like chicken noodle soup. So they were trying to figure out what's happening. So they hired people from all over the, not just the country, but all over the world. And it turns out that the new generation of people that like new generation of soup eaters, they like to try new flavors, so some more exotic flavors. So they had to do something about it. So they started bringing out like new flavors, like Marcella or like some other flavors, exotic flavors that you wouldn't think about like 20 years ago, even like 10 years ago. So being able to be diversified, include a lot of people is not only gonna help your company, help your employees, but it's gonna help your business as well. And at the end, like that's what a lot of businesses are after. So you're able to offer solutions with like today's market, anyone can just go somewhere else. So you got to be able to stay on top of the game and be diversified and able to get a bigger market.
I agree with both of my colleagues here. The only add I will have here in terms of an emerging trend, in my opinion, I certainly need to do more research here, is I'm going to use the term generational savvy. The individuals who are entering the workforce now, so these are, you know, college graduates or folks that are re-entering the workforce, they are expecting a different experience. With the onset of flexibility, working from home, hybrid, you know, attracting and retaining talent is now going to require us to be a bit more open in our ideas of what we would consider traditional employment. And to be able to hold on to, I think, key talent, we need to understand and respect that, and Patrice made this point earlier, you know, we are interviewing them and they are interviewing us as well. So I think the generations are definitely more savvy. They have a lot more information at their fingertips. They can go on and take a look at a profile of a company, get all kinds of information from their website. They can jump on Glassdoor. They can find the comments. These, you know, especially if you're an intern or part of any kind of programming, you've created a network. Everybody knows somebody that works, you know, this place or that place. So I think that there's just definitely an element of savviness that we've not seen in the market in a very long time. And as organizations, as we compete for top talent, we're going to need to be ready to have those conversations and allow you know, that generation to shine and be an organization that is considered a great place to work out in there.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like the future of DEI in the workplace is a competitive advantage, right? And I do recall some numbers that were shared at the GCP recently held a DEI conference, and some interesting numbers were shared there that I think kind of strengthen this point. You know, I saw companies that foster diversity are on average 33% more profitable. 87% of diverse teams achieve better results and make better decisions. Companies with diverse boards, you know, board of governors or board of trustees, see 43% more profits, right? So as we move forward into the 21st century, it's only becoming more important for companies and organizations to embrace DEI and especially belonging in the workplace. And so, you know, right on point, that the future of DEI is that you need to adapt and you need to understand that it's going to keep you competitive. as well. So brilliant, very insightful, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. So we'll open it up now to questions. If anyone has any questions from the audience, feel free to put them into the Q&A. And I'm just going to kind of look to see here if there are any that have been asked. Okay. So here's one. Many attendees are working directly with students that are preparing to enter the workforce. What advice will the panelists give a student today who is searching for their first destination, career, or office in regards to identifying a culture that fits with them, that they embrace?
I would say you're looking for a place that will respect you as an individual, how you present and show up in the world, and also provide you the professional development that you're going to need to be able to have the opportunity for that next job, in the next 2 to 3 years or so, but really giving advice, and also they can share experiences and saying, here are examples of when we're doing this. It's one thing to say, hey, do you support your new employees? That answer is going to be, of course we do. But if you ask, can you give examples of ways that you've supported your entry-level positions or employees to have the next opportunity? Those are things that you can really hang your hat on, getting those examples.
Yeah, I also like to add, just like you're saying, interview them as well. So like right now, like something what I have done on interviews myself, I'm like, why is this position open? What happened to the previous person? Like, what's your turnover rate? So you want to like know all the details, because you want to choose you want to choose a big place, because this place is either going to make you like very happy or it's going to make you very upset. So that's definitely going to impact your life.
I agree with what's being said. The other thing that I would add, and I said before, right, do your homework. There are a number of resources that are out there for you to look into prior to the interview. But also, let's assume that you have the interview, the savvy recruiter and interview team have answered all of your questions. This sounds fabulous. You join the organization and you get to peek behind the curtain and you realize this is not what I was told. I believe that there has been a shift from potential employers, when we look at resumes and we see, wow, someone's been at a company for 2 years and then they go to another company for 2 years and, maybe they're here for 18 months. This person doesn't look stable. That is no longer the case holistically. I would say to you, students, that, you have to dip your toe in the water. And if it's not exactly what you were expecting, what can you gain from that opportunity? What development opportunity might there be? You certainly want to give back to the organization as well, but it's okay to move on. It's okay to use that as a learning experience, as long as you're able in your next job interview to explain to that hiring team why you made the move. And it's not, they didn't treat me right? You want to come up with some very specific reasons why you have decided to move on to another opportunity and feel that particular interview and the folks you're talking to is the right group to go to. So don't join an organization and feel as though you're stuck there, especially when you realize it is not what you expected. Statistically, this generation will have 6 to 7 careers, not jobs, 6 to 7 careers in their working life span. And I believe that, again, companies, as long as you're able to, tell that story of your journey, will be welcoming as you've hopefully improved skill set, gained experience, and continue to show growth. So do not feel as though you're stuck somewhere just because someone gave you a job. You're doing work for them as well.
So here's another question that I think is timely. So what are some effective ways to recruit and retain first-generation diverse talent? In other words, the individuals are the first in their family to attend college and enter the workforce. the individuals may lack basic professional skills that others who may have grown up in a more privileged setting may have gained. What are some effective ways that your organizations have recruited and retained those types of individuals, those first generation individuals?
You're on mute, Patrice.
I think mentorship is what first comes to mind from my point of view. But then also, you know, I'm a person that believes in honesty and transparency. And so I think as a professional culture, we need to get used to having those honest, crucial conversations. And it's taking someone to the side and saying, hey, if you're looking to move up, here are the things that you're going to have to display. Here's what that looks like. When I had my first real job, I was reminiscing about this the other day. I was in my office. It was kind of a cubicle, and I was having a great time. I had a song in my head. I was snapping my fingers and just, you know, in my own world. And my supervisor says, you know, Patrice, I don't think that's professional. And me, in my youth, said, it's not? I had no idea. So I think part of it is giving them grace, but also being honest so that they can learn from this experience and continue to grow in that position.
I would agree with that. I can't say enough about the importance of mentorship, formal or informal. We have an ambassador program here at Avient, and that ambassador program, what we seek to do through the onboarding process, because the onboarding doesn't stop when you take the job and sign your paperwork, right? It's even beyond the first 90 days. So how do we pair up, you know, individuals to get some of this informal direction, if you will? It could be just something as simple. I don't know about your organizations, you know, just navigating your way in the building sometimes can be a lot. You know, you're asked to go to a conference room, or you're asked to do this, that, or the other. And it, you know, it's great to have someone that you can call and get their insight. And so part of our onboarding process, especially for our ethnically diverse as well as gender associates, we try to pair them with an ambassador to help with that, moving them into the organization as effectively as possible. And this individual is often at a peer level. It's not meant to be a manager or supervisor, but to create this peer-to-peer connection and what I would say informal network to help that new associate have a landing place where they feel comfortable, can be honest and transparent as they navigate their way in the organization.
Yeah. So I will say also, like, coaching, you know, just coaching, empowering your team, your individual, like you just stated, to be like given responsibilities, and this is what is expected, and I know you can do it. So just like empowering and coaching, that's how you are able to develop this person, because like you said, they may not know, but they're able to learn. So I'll say just empowering and coaching.
Yeah, it sounds like what I'm hearing is that mentorship is important, but what's also important is seeking out feedback and being open to feedback when it comes. Obviously, it needs to be constructive, right? But, you know, being open to, you know, whether you're first generation or not, no one knows everything when they get into their first job, or, you know, or when they're an early career professional. And so being open to those mentorship relationships and the feedback that you gain seems to be very valuable. Well, as we're wrapping up here, you know, we have about 5 minutes left here. I wanted to give the panelists an opportunity to share maybe some final thoughts, or one final piece of advice that you may give to either organizations that are trying to be more inclusive, or to students who are looking to join the workforce and be somewhere that is, you know, equitable and inclusive. So what's one, from all the panelists, what's one piece of final advice? Patrice, we'll start with you.
Culture is very important. The numbers can look really good in terms of what your diversity looks like from a hiring standpoint, but if you're not retaining them, you're just losing money, and it is a very expensive proposition. So make sure that you're putting the time into developing the culture where people want to stay.
Thank you. Eliseo.
Yeah, I will say, you diversify, being able to get a different point of view. If you're stuck in one way, being able to diversify in different races, different ages as well, you're going to be able to expand your market and your customer base.
Renita?
I would agree. What came to mind when you asked that question, Phil, was this is work that we can all do. This is not something that's done to us or for us. The culture is made up of the people that are in the organizations. And granted, yes, there should be some leadership, some guidance, some commitment, but it is not something that someone is doing to you. Be part of the experience, be part of the change, be part of the movement, the progress, and that perspective, I think, matters in your attitude and how you show up every day. And it just as an individual seeking ongoing development and growth, it can be very satisfying. So we all, need to bring our toys to the sandbox and figure out how we can play best together in alignment with what my colleagues have said, as well as certainly critical. But we all have a part to play.
Well, again, thank you so much to our wonderful panelists here. I feel that this has been such an insightful conversation, an impactful conversation. I believe that things that we can take away from this conversation regarding creating a DEI workplace culture is intentionality from the top down, collaboration amongst everyone in the organization to lift each other up, and to understand that we have to see outcomes across all aspects of our mission, all aspects of our vision, all aspects of our organization. It can't be another bullet point on the list. And so super important work that's being done by all three of you. Thank you so much for your time. I hope this was impactful for all of the rest of the attendees. Thank you for your time. And again, thank you to the NCCA for sponsoring this event. We're so appreciative of all of your support. I hope everyone has a great rest of your Tuesday evening. And again, thank you for attending.